Welcome back to Following Noah on a Stormlight podcast. This episode is 1, 2, 3 of our discussion into A Rhythm of War. Paul, how are you?
Great. Yeah. Welcome everyone to our episode. I'm really excited to talk about Rhythm of War this week.
I'm just going to start censoring you whenever I hand it over to you.
Okay,
Use that mute button.
Trevor, I've already thought it all the way through. I've thought away all of our teen numbers. I have thought through them.
Can't wait to get
You
to
will have to
episode
kick
200
me.
then.
You will have to remove me from this podcast.
Elliot?
I'm good. I'm going to stick with episode 1, 2, 3.
Sounds good. We have a highlight of mine out of the entirety of the Stormlight Archive, not just Rhythm of War, to talk about this episode. Do you guys have 2 words to summarize episode 1, 2, 3? Paul.
Yep, I sure do. I cannot wait to talk about these chapters. My 2 words are sentimentality and prisoner.
Okay. Elliot?
I guarantee my 2 words are directly out of your highlight of the Stormlight Archives, Trevor. My 2 words are warm again.
Yes. Let's use these 4 words and talk about part 4 of Rhythm of. All right, we'll go to Paul. We'll go to Elliot first because I assume I know what those are about.
I'm not going to read the quote just yet. We'll get into the discussion of our Hoyd story because it is a good one. But the end of that story, or the takeaway, if you will, is just such an encouraging outlook that Hoyd is able to give to Kaladin of, you're in a dark place, but you will be warm again someday. That just, it will get better.
Yeah. Paul?
Well, my 2 words, my first one is fairly similar to Elliot's sentiment there. Sentimentality is going to be about chapter 80, The Dog and the Dragon, and tells a sweet story, which we'll talk in depth later, I'm sure. But basically, I almost chose like family for my word here, but kind of just like there was a sweet message there of what a dog has that a dragon does not. And it was more like centered around like family happiness around the hearth kind of like atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I just thought about sentimentality.
Did you
Oh,
tell me your second
I had
word?
yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. My second word is prisoner, which, like, honestly, I loved chapter 80 so much. I wanted to make both my words about it, but I was like, ugh, okay, I'll think of something else. And prisoner is with our last chapter that we're going to talk about, which is titled Knife. And we see Shallan is given a knife by Maraise, which we've seen before. Not the same knife, but a knife of the same kind.
Okay.
That we saw, I believe, Moash use at the end of Oathbringer.
Yes.
When, as far as we know, when he killed Yezrian. But everything that Murray said sounded like it wouldn't kill per se a herald. They would still be able to talk to him. So, in my mind, it sounded like it's a prisoner hostage situation that they're just trapped. Maybe not dead, but trapped. So that was why I chose prisoner.
Sounds good. Well, there's going to be 2 dramatic parts to this episode. There's going to be part A of chapter 80 and then everything else. Before we get to chapter 80 though, let's go through 79 real quick because it's actually a pretty cool chapter. We get a Verlaine point of view chapter. He is walking through the tower, and we get a day in the life of Verlaine perspective of literally everybody hates him except for Bridge 4. Everybody mistrusts him for some reason at best, or deliberately wants him dead or in prison at worst. He's walking through Urithiru. All the humans have turned their back on him. If they were ever accepting of him, besides Bridge 4, the other humans, they have turned from him because the singers and the fused have taken control of the tower. So who's the first person to blame on how they did that? Verlaine. They view him as the spy that was there ahead of time that helped take down the tower, is how they see him. And then the fused view him as a traitor, and then the singers view him as some sort of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Reverent, like somebody to be cautious of, I guess. Like, he's part of the listeners, and they don't really know what to do with the listeners. Did they save us? Did they give us our forms back? Are they traitors?
Yeah. He's definitely like a red flag or cause for concern.
Right. He just doesn't fit anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's really pretty sad of Verlaine walking through this tower, and everybody on both sides doesn't want him there. So what did you guys think of this chapter?
It was very sad, Trevor. So my biggest want for Verlaine before this chapter was for him to kind of like find, I don't know if I would say a sense of belonging, but that's a pretty good way to put it. We see, like, what we see the most of him so far is he's a member of Bridge 4 from pretty early on in our story. And Kaladin does his best to include him in things, but it's almost like he can't fully make him an included, welcomed member. There's just differences, and it's really hard to like fully incorporate Relaine. Even things like they go and get their like matching tattoos, and it doesn't work with Relaine, right? Like it
does eventually. They have to use a separate ink for him because his skin is so dark. But yes.
I had forgotten about that. In my head, it just didn't work, and I was like, "That's just really sad." Like all your like friends, let's say, like go do something, and you can't participate. That's just kind of sad, and I feel like that almost sums up his character of like not quite being able to fit in. And so we knew he was not going back to the fused on good terms, or whenever he got back with them. But we really see like he cannot catch a break. He can't win for losing in the department of like finding his people. Venli is the closest person he has to relate to, I think, which is cool. I bet that will turn into something really neat. But I can't help but feel sorry for Relaine.
Same. I echo all that. It's cool to get in his head a little bit, get a perspective from him, which I don't remember if we've gotten that before. If we have, it's been a little while. So getting to see that. He has a fun reunion with David at the end, which was pretty cool. Another kind of outcast who doesn't really fit in anywhere, but yeah, definitely feeling for Relaine a little bit here.
And yeah, at the end here, David walks in and says like 4 full sentences. We saw him say life before death right before Kaladin went running down the stairs. But that is the only thing we have heard David say, and up until this point he walks in and says, "Relaine, I really need your help. Kaladin's asleep and won't wake up. I think he's dying." He says that full thing to Relaine, which is it's a pretty cool moment that they can share between the two of them. So Relaine and Liren are working pretty closely together right now to take care of the asleep Radiants, and Liren and Hesina are pretty concerned for their safety right now because they said they were they're being spotted by Stormform Regals that are on guard. So if someone puts two and two together, they'll figure out that Liren is who the pursuer has been looking for. So it's only a matter of time before the pursuer comes looking for them. They're still under the protection of Leshwi right now, but that may not stop the pursuer from taking action. So we'll see how that goes.
I definitely don't think they're safe. We've seen the pursuer stoop to some pretty low tactics before, so wouldn't be surprised that if he learns about them, that he'll be tempted to use them against Kaladin again.
Yeah. Anything else from this this chapter here? All right. Chapter 80. All right. Okay. Where do we start?
I think we should just read the whole thing.
I was going to say, if you are listening to this podcast and you are not reading along with us, first of all, that's totally fine. But you should pause, go read or listen to The Dog and the Dragon, and then come back, because there are so many specifics in this chapter that land so well. I don't really know how to say it other than this chapter is beautifully sculpted and beautifully placed in this book. And on that note, what are your first couple takeaways from this chapter, and then we'll talk about it as a whole.
So my takeaway, what I left this chapter feeling was, wow, what a masterclass on empathy that Wit just demonstrated. And I can, as we get into the specifics, I'll point out where and why, because there's multiple examples here of exactly how you are the best way to approach someone who's going through something difficult. And it's not, I'll speak for myself here, it's not the way I would intuitively approach someone. Usually what I find myself trying to do is trying to, comfort someone who's going through pain.
Yeah.
If you read this carefully, that's not what Wit does here. He does multiple other very intentional things here that in the end does a great job of lifting Kaladin's spirit and leaving him feeling inspired. So yeah, really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
One, Kaladin asks for a story, which I think was cool, like development. That's kind of been one of my down point views of Kaladin's character is all this crazy stuff happens, and I feel like he's not the same. He's nowhere near like the wretch that you see in the Way of Kings, but it is like, all right, give yourself a break. Come on, Kaladin. But anyways, here he asks Hoid for a story, pretty much. And not only that, this was my favorite Hoid story and like Hoid story chapter.
Yeah.
I liked this more than the Wander Sail. I thought it was excellent. I briefly mentioned it with my word sentimentality that I loved, like, the story was honestly like just neat to hear. It was like almost like a children's tale, but it was really cool. And my favorite takeaway was it's the story of a dog that wants to become a dragon and wants to show everyone that he has become a dragon, so he tries to take on the embodiments, right? And through him trying to reach his goal, he kind of ends up doing some good. And basically gets welcomed into, he lives on this like farm, if you will, and basically gets welcomed into the farmer's house, gets a full meal, like full belly of food, and gets to kind of play with the children and all this stuff. And it almost doesn't really like give you the point or that like closure.
Mm-hmm.
And already I enjoyed it, but then whenever it did, it really nailed it home to me that I think this is my favorite Hoid moment, because it talks about how yes, the dog cannot become a dragon, but the dog does have something valuable that the dragon does not have, and that's being able to be like in a warm home with people who love him and a belly full of food, you know. And I'm a big sucker for like kind of simple life pleasures, like
Yeah.
being a big focal point. I've said this before. I'm a huge Tolkien fan, and I feel like he does a pretty good job of that being like a point of a lot of his writing, i.e., the Hobbits, and just a lot of stuff like that. And so, yeah, that was probably my biggest takeaway. The part that I really loved. Ooh, also, we get mentioned that there's a dragon, like an actual dragon, somewhere on
Yes,
Roshar.
we do.
That made me think. So we'll talk.
I think one of the most impressive parts of this entire chapter is, and I guess I can't speak for everybody who reads Rhythm of War, but Brandon Sanderson knows exactly what I want. Like me specifically, he knows exactly what I want as a reader, because Kaladin sits down next to a fire in this hellscape of a vision that he's in, and he asks, "Can I have a story?" And as a reader, I'm just like, yes, that's what I want. I want to sit next to Wit and hear a story just for 20 minutes, just so we can go back into this terrible time that Cal has been having lately. I just want to sit down and listen to a Hoyd story because I've been wanting it. And Kaladin finally asks for one, and when he gets the opportunity, and Wit is there to take advantage of it. And I think it's a really cool moment of Brandon Sanderson knowing exactly what he's doing. It was like, I'm going to string this out as long as I can and get them to ask for it, and then I'll give it to him when Kaladin asks for it.
I love Wit's response to that too. He like kind of is taken aback when Kaladin asks for the story, and he's like, well, I've never actually been asked for one before. I always, the implied there being I usually have to force them on other people, in their moment of need. So yeah, a different type of, I forget what the phrase we're supposed to use for these moments is.
Therapy session?
Yeah.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned, Elliot, of the way Wit sets this up before he's beginning his story. The way Kaladin asks for it, he meets him in the storm, and he just has a quick conversation with him. And I'll read it for us. This is on 912 in my book. "How long can I stay with you?" Kaladin asked. "Not long, I fear," Wit said, serving him a bowl of stew. 20 minutes or so." "I have to go back out into that?" Wit nodded. "I'm afraid it's going to get worse, Kaladin. I'm sorry." "Worse than this?" "Unfortunately." "I'm not strong enough, Wit," Kaladin whispered. It all has been a lie. I've never been strong enough." Wit took a bite of his stew, and then nodded. "You agree?" Kaladin asked. You know you better than I what your limits are," Wit said. "It's not such a terrible thing to be so weak. Makes us need one another. I should never complain if someone recognizes their failings, though it might put me out of a job if too many share your wisdom, young bridgeman." "And if all this is too much for me," Kaladin asked, "if I can't keep fighting, if I just stop and give up?" "Are you close to that?" "Yes," Kaladin whispered. "Then best eat your stew," Wit said, pointing with his spoon. "A man shouldn't lie down and die on an empty stomach." And you were talking about that earlier, Elliot, how he doesn't... Wit's not here to comfort. He's not here to sugarcoat. I mean, he is here to comfort. He's not here to sugarcoat the terrible situation that Kaladin is in. He's acknowledging that, and then saying, "Okay, now what?" So be having that approach of it's going to be okay is not what Wit says. He says it's going to get worse, which we'll talk about here. We'll come back to that here in a second. But it just acknowledging and not necessarily lying to the person who's struggling and say it'll it'll be better soon. He does say that eventually, but he says it very well could get worse, and then it'll get better.
And that is exactly what I was talking about with the empathy. Not sympathy, but true empathy, which is the difference there being empathy is feeling someone's pain with them. It's not feeling sorry that they are going through pain. It's feeling that what they are feeling alongside them. Wit doesn't come in here and throw an arm around Kaladin's shoulder and say, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. He says, it's not going to be okay, but I'm here and here's some stew. Like, I'm here in this moment with you to get you through this, not here to tell you that it's going to be okay, because it may not. But that's the difference. And that is what's so not maybe intuitive about that, of when someone's going through something tough, it's so instinctual just to kind of reach out and say, you can do this. You got this. It's going to be okay. That just kind of sounds like someone who's distant, or maybe doesn't quite. The response to that is usually, oh, you don't understand what I'm going through. Wit steps into the moment with him, makes him some stew, and says, all right, man, I'm here for you.
Yeah. And then I love the whimsical presentation that Design and Wit have here, where Wit fully embraces the storyteller aesthetic, and Brandon Sanderson fully embraces it too. It's such a fantasy like cliche of the story beside the fire, of let me tell you a story, and like of something I heard from a tavern long ago or whatever. And Brandon Sanderson just fully embraces that. It's like, yes, I'm going to have a fireside storyteller in my books, and you're going to love it. And here we are. So Wit's like fully embracing that as well, of I'm going to tell you a story by the fire because that's what I do.
And watch what he does with it too, which I think is very intentional. He starts the story off by saying, oh, and by the way, this is a meaningless story. Don't search for a moral, because there isn't one. This is a different kind of story. And then he goes into it. Then at the end, Kaladin kind of comes to the moral himself. And I think you learn that there was a moral of the story, that there was a point.
Right.
But what Wit has done is this leads into the inspiration side of it. He's not there to kind of put up a banner and say, here's the moral you need to learn, Kaladin. He's just going to tell a story, and he's going to let Kaladin fill in the blanks. He's going to let Kaladin come to the realization himself, which is so much more meaningful to someone at the end, where they realize themselves what they're missing, not you tell them what they're not seeing. And that's another just brilliant aspect of this scene.
I'll summarize the actual story real quick, but if you haven't read it recently, please go do. The dog in the story is trying to become a dragon, and he divides it into 3 separate ways. I need to go give myself scales, I need to talk like a dragon, and I need to fly like a dragon. So he figures out, seeds kind of look like scales-ish. I'll go make a bunch of seeds. So he does that, puts them on his body, and all the dogs say, you don't look like a dragon, go back to being a dog. Then he learns to write on the ground with his stick and communicate that way, but the dogs don't even understand it at first, and he has to explain what he's doing, and then the dogs say, that's not speaking, go back to being a dog. And then the third one is flying, and he goes to the hay whatever loft. What is that called? There's a specific name for it, I don't remember.
The hayloft.
Hayloft. Yeah.
No, the mechanism, the lift, whatever. And he jumps off the loft and lowers himself down gracefully and says, I'm flying. And the dog's like, you're not flying. And then immediately, cliche, he gets to put all these to good use when he runs out. The toddler has fallen into the well, and he writes on the ground, "Lower me," gets tied with a rope and lowered into the well, saves the toddler. And at the end of the story, the dog says to himself, "I am a complete and utter failure. I could not become a dragon." The end.
It definitely had an element of, I think it was Trevor, maybe it was Paul. You guys mentioned this already, of like children's fairy tale, or almost like Aesop's fable type story. You know, the dog and the dragon. It was very simple, very predictable, very fun twist at the end, but it served a much greater purpose, which was cool, which is what Kaladin needed to hear.
Exactly. That was the biggest thing I was thinking while listening to this. Was yeah, it was like a children's story. It was a cute dog doing something and everyone laughed. Like it was very like you could just go pick up a random children's book, and I feel like it would be pretty similar.
This is the tortoise and the hare, like,
Yes.
level of
Yeah, exactly. And but it was just used so well. I absolutely loved it. And it's a good, also, like, it was a really good point for Kaladin of he's been chasing such a lofty goal and doing so much in the in the journey, if you will. And he's been focusing too much on the destination, if you will.
the
That it was a really good thing to point out to him specifically.
And I love the use of the ending, how it's so jarring and bad that Kaladin gets mad at it, and then he's like, "Tell me the real ending, because the dog is a hero. He's doing all this great stuff." And then he realizes it, and he's like, "Wait a minute, this is about me, isn't it?" And that's when it clicks for him, and it's like, "I told you not to assign any moral to it." And Zion's like, "Well, actually, he didn't promise. You just kept talking." Blah,
Speaking
blah,
of,
blah, blah, blah.
I absolutely loved the spread in this chapter. I thought he was I thought the spread was hilarious, and from my perspective, this could have just been a ruse, but it seemed like Hoyd was actually flustered with design. It's design, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, her
With
name's Design.
Seemed actually flustered by design and was like, "Why did I bond you to anyways?" You know, like it was very like quarrelsome and in a fun way, and I absolutely loved it. I'm trying to think of an aspect of this chapter that I didn't love.
I loved how design spoils the story right at the start.
Yes.
Yes,
It was such a great, you know. Oh, and by the way, the dogs can't become dragons. Like, you should know that up front. And Wick gets all mad at her, like, "What are you doing? Don't spoil stories." Which, like, that was exactly what Wit said. I imagine that in like all caps, just like yelling at her.
I think it's really funny and pretty like true to our cryptics of like, yeah, you should know what happens if you're going to sign up to listen to this. You know, like you should know what's going to happen. And I thought that was funny.
You don't go to the market and buy a mystery box and bring it home. You have to know
Yes.
what you're getting into.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I also loved all the parts where Kaladin tried to interrupt and like talk about the story, and which just like, "This isn't the part where you talk. Shut up. Let me keep talking."
Yeah. The whole drama suspense thing is actually straight out of Brandon Sanderson's podcast, where he talks about being an author is such a weird business model, because you're not like, let's say you buy a book from a brand new author that you've like not heard about, whatever, you are paying up front for something you don't know will be worth your time, or you're paying up front for based on what someone has told you will be worth your time. You don't know if it will be worth your time or not, which he's like, yeah, there's no other thing besides like buying media that is, you don't know if your money is well spent yet or not. How does the actual story end when Kaladin asks for it?
We've touched on it a little bit already, but the end of the story is essentially that the dog was not a failure, but by aspiring to be something so much greater than it was, for example, the dragon, it was able to achieve much more than any dog had ever achieved. So even though it might have felt like a failure, it wasn't, because it had done something incredible along the way. And then what I loved too was sort of the after moral of the story, which was the nugget that Wit leaves Kaladin with as their time is drawing to a close. And that was the quote that tied into the two words I had at the beginning, which I do want to read if now's a good time.
Yep.
So he's told him the story. He's left him with the moral. He's kind of opened his eyes to see that he's not a failure. He can do this. He has done things incredible. Kaladin responds with this. It won't be like that for me, Kaladin said. You told me it would get worse. It will, Wit said. But then it will get better. Then it will get worse again. Then better. This is life. And I will not lie by saying every day will be sunshine. But there will be sunshine again. And that is a very different thing to say. That is truth. I promise you, Kaladin, you will be warm again. And that's like the second to last sentence of the chapter. It ends on that, which was so like spine tingly, moment for me. It was like, yes, that's so good. And it's so exactly what Kaladin needs to hear in this moment. He feels like he's alone. He feels like he's betrayed all his friends. He feels like he has no one to help him. And Kaladin comes in with this story that kind of inspires him, shows him he is something, and then leaves him with this, what you're going through is hell, but it will get better. That was awesome.
Yeah. What do you guys think it will get worse before it gets better means? What is Wit foreshadowing?
So we know that Moash is a part of all this.
Yes.
We know that Moash has been given a mission to specifically target Kaladin. So seemingly this is the direct handiwork of Moash. Moash hasn't entered the scene yet, per se. I could see worse being the actual physical arrival of Moash. And maybe not just nightmare torture, maybe physical torture.
Okay. Any predictions, Paul?
I am also on board with the Moash, like at least Moash coming into the scene here. We haven't seen him since part 1, and that was like kind of a big deal. There was a lot that happened there, and we know that is Moash's plan is to get at Kaladin. So I fully expected to see that, and I'm really grateful for this chapter because it gave me so much more faith in Kaladin. And like, I feel like if you were to tell me, if you were to rewind time before I read this, and we're like, yeah, Moash is gonna like torment Kaladin, but Kaladin is gonna hear a sweet story and then like feel boosted from that. Like, I was like, no, Kaladin wouldn't really like. But after like reading this chapter, I was like, oh yeah, Kaladin could take on Odium right now. Like, I don't know. Or at least like if it's like an emotional like struggle or battle, like I feel like this was such a good story to like hold true to like yourself and what you like have, I guess. So I'm feeling pumped up. I'm ready for Kaladin to just go smack Moash around.
Sounds good.
I have a couple questions about actually not the story that Wit shares here.
I have a couple questions from our Discord to offer you guys about the chapter surrounding the story. So go ahead, Paul, or go ahead, Elliot, and I will follow up with something else.
Interesting. Okay, I'm curious what those are going to be. There's two things that I noticed. The first is actually before the story even starts, when Wit first appears and creates this bubble of light to kind of protect Kaladin. He makes some interesting comments. He says he wonders how Odium is targeting Kaladin specifically without having a connection. And I think we as readers know the answer to this, that
You do.
Wit does not. And I think the answer is Moash.
Correct.
I think we saw that. I think this was mentioned specifically. Odium is using Moash because Moash has some sort of connection to Kaladin. So that's the piece that Hoyd doesn't see, is that Moash has the connection to Kaladin. Odium and or Moash is using that connection to do this with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bunny trail this real quick. This should be short. That makes sense to me. What that actually makes me start to wonder is, in this scene, Wit references the visions that Dalinar had from Honor.
Yep.
If those are similar, did that, the Honor tapes that we've called them before,
yes,
did those visions require a connection? And what and who were involved in that connection? Clearly Dalinar's on one end of the connection, but who's on the other?
I would assume yes to your first question, that those would require capital C connection. Second one, I would assume that Honor himself, the vessel of Honor, that Dalinar has a connection to the vessel of Honor, and that is why he's able to receive them.
Interesting. That thought popped into my head. And then now I start going down paths of like, okay, well, how do you establish connections? Because clearly you can't just like reach out to someone, even a shard, can't just reach out to someone and create a connection, because that's what Wit's talking about here. That,
Right.
Odium doesn't have a connection with you. Why is he able to do this? So how did Honor or Tanavast, is that the vessel of
Yes.
Honor? Am I remembering my
Yes.
Cosmere correctly? Why does Tanavast or Honor have a connection with Dalinar? How did that get created? Or is the Stormfather in here somehow? Is it like a connection between Dalinar and the Stormfather that was existing long before they actually bonded as a radiant pair? Those are actually the kind of questions I was thinking about based on Wit's comments here.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for you. It's a good question.
But the bigger question that I can't answer comes after the story. That was before the story. Then we get our story. Wit makes kind of an offhand comment here in the wrap up here. He says this, I'll read it. "I can't keep this bubble up much longer, I'm afraid," Wit said. "He'll notice if I do, and then he'll destroy me. I have violated our agreement, which exposes me to his direct action." And then he kind of quips at the end. "I'd rather not be killed, as I have 7 more people I want to insult today." I kind of wrote the last one off there as just him being silly. But "I have violated our agreement, which exposes me to his direct action." Who is his? Who is this he's referring to? It seems like from context it would be Odium. And then going back a sentence, "I have violated our agreement." Does Hoyd have some kind of agreement with Odium? Is this something I've forgotten? Is this new info? What is going on with this?
So I said this to Paul before the episode started. I really want to talk about this. I can't talk about this until the end of the book. I promise you we will revisit this. I promise. I can't talk now.
Interesting.
My thoughts on this, which this is very much like way out there. I don't think this holds much weight. But we've seen these letters from Hoyd, right?
Yeah.
Going all over to people on this kind of real, like, Cosmere zoomed out scope, like these dragons, people who are concerned about the actual shards of Adonalsium. And I don't know if like there's some agreement between Hoyd and just the general shards of Adonalsium. And Odium is one of those shards, right? So maybe something like that. I don't know what he would have specifically with Odium.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
It's been a while since I've just had to sit and shut up on the podcast.
Uh-huh.
I don't miss this feeling. I
Yeah.
want to talk.
And I feel like Paul and I, we can't even theorize too much on this. I mean, we can completely guess as to what might be going on here, but I don't feel like I know enough here to even try and pull any evidence together. I'm sure the evidence is there. I'm just not seeing it.
Anything else well, before I go, for the dog and the dragon? I have some questions to ask you, but anything else before then?
Just real quick, we didn't talk, well, we mentioned it, the reference to a dragon on Roshar.
Yes. I don't remember what brings him to say it, but someone, Kaladin or someone says something, and he's showing. Hoyd, I think, is showing Kaladin what a dog looks like. He's like, a dog, and he's like, it's this. It's fun and fluffy and loyal. They're great. Dogs are amazing. Even Hoyd thinks so. And then here's a dragon, and shows him a dragon, like kind of an image of a dragon. And these are kind of like hypothetical, like imaginary creatures to Kaladin, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, there is a. He does think that there may be dogs in
Shinovar?
Shinovar. And stuff like that. Maybe this is a Shen thing, but dragons. He's like, oh, no dragons really. But Hoyd is like, well, there is one, but something about she's shy, or I don't remember what he says exactly, but something like that. That there is a dragon on Roshar, and it sounded like a person. Like this dragon is in a person's form, I guess. And I can't help but think it's probably someone we've met, and I'm going to be mad about it because we've known who it is, or like we've known the person or something. But I have no idea who it would be. Maybe Yasna. She's a little bit suspect, but there's no way, right? Because she's Dalinar's
Oh man,
niece. So I feel like that's unlikely. But
Not-
I feel like she's still up to things that we don't fully understand.
not to shoot down your fabulous theory immediately. I apologize for this, but so Brandon Sanderson actually answered this before Rhythm of War even came out. In a Words of Brandon, which is like he gets asked at a live stream or convention, and I told you this. Do you remember what I told you, Elliot?
Not so much. I know we've talked about dragons in the Cosmere before.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the name Frost.
Yep.
In association with our discussion of dragons. I may have made this up, but I almost want to say you told us that there's like exactly 2 dragons in the Cosmere.
2 that we know of.
Okay, 2 that we know of. That's as much as I remember.
Yes, so this is back in Cosmere 101, the Cosmere 101 episode, the episode like 96 or something like that. I told you we know of exactly 2, or we knew of exactly 2 dragons at the end of Oathbringer. One was named Frost, and he is a recipient of one of the letters that is written back and forth between Hoyd and Frost. The second one is on Roshar, and she is a shapeshifter, so she does not take the form of a dragon. Or, more correctly, she has given up her form of a dragon and taken on a vessel. Cultivation, or Corvellium Avast, at least was at one time a dragon, is who he's talking about.
Okay.
Do you remember me saying that in Cosmere 101?
Vaguely. We learned a lot of things in that
Yeah.
episode.
Yes.
Yeah, I vaguely, for sure. I knew that we knew two dragons, and it was Frost and someone else. I didn't know it was cultivation. Also, I didn't realize what was the name again for
Corvellium
cultivation?
Avast.
Okay, I didn't know. I guess Avast is like a suffix for shards. Is it a suffix for shards? Kind of like we have
See,
Elin for
that is a very
heralds?
interesting question, because those are not
Is it-
Roshar names. Those are their original names before they even obtained their vessels, which makes me think that Tanavast and Corvellium Avast were actually just related. Like that is just part of their
Okay.
names, and they're related.
That would make sense. They're like because Odium isn't like kind of isn't native to Roshar, right? Like
Correct.
it could be that they were the two on Roshar, kind of twinsies, you know.
Right.
It could make sense. I was just wondering if that was like a thing with supposed to be with all the shards, like we see like Talon Elilin, right? And
Right.
Izera Zaelin, all the names like that. So I was like, oh, is his name just Tan? And I thought that's like I was like Tanavas is such a cool name, but anyways, that's kind of off topic.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to spend your brain. All right. Question from our audience. This is Phoenix in our Discord. He messaged me about an hour before we started recording and said, "Hey, Trevor, since I figured you guys are going to record the podcast about Dog and the Dragon chapter soon, I just wanted to see if you could ask Paul and Eliot where they think Kaladin and Hoyd are during the dream. Is it real? Did they somehow get transported to Braze, an imitation of Braze, in the middle of a high storm? Is that where the heralds go when through every desolation, etc., etc.?" While you think of that, I'm going to read the physical description we get of where they are for you as a quick refresher for you. Give me 1 second. It's on 908, or sorry, 909 in my book. It says, "The wind crashed into him, pressing him against something hard. A rock formation? He was somewhere barren. No sign of rock buds or vines in the flashes of terrifying light. Only endless windswept rocky crags. It reminded him of the shattered plains, but with far more variation to the elevation. Peaks and precipices red and gray. So many holes and tunnels. Surely there was a place to hide. Please, just let me rest for a minute." He pushed forward, holding the rock wall, trying not to stumble. He had to fight the wind. The terrible wind. Hate, hate, hate. Lightning flashed, blinding him. He huddled beside the rock as the wind blew stronger. When he started moving, he could see a bit better. Sometimes it was pure darkness. Sometimes he could see a little, though there was no light source he could locate. Merely a persistent, directionless illumination. Like another place he couldn't remember.
With that, my thoughts on where this might be would be so I'm thinking of Dalinar's visions
Okay.
and how the things that we got to see. We got to see the what was the name of the recreants? Was that the name? The day where all the shard bearers, all the knights radiant threw their swords down.
Yep, that's the recreants.
Okay. We got to see that. We got to see we got to see Noadon. We got to see a lot of things in the past. I'm thinking that this is in the past. I'm thinking that this is maybe our Shattered Plains were pretty different, but in the Shattered Plains, just like way in the past, of maybe during like the first like desolation, like in the midst of like maybe right before I don't know Oath Pact is made, something along those lines where Roshar is in really dire straits, and needs to be saved. I guess. But it seems like he says it's like the Shattered Plains, but different, you know. And so I'm thinking it's just the Shattered Plains way in the past, or it could be some kind of like pseudo alternate, like this is what the Shattered Plains could look like um, if the Void Bringers take over, you know. But I think he's still just on the Shattered Plains,
Okay.
but in a vision.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit and use some of Wit's knowledge to help me answer this, because Wit actually drops a few helpful hints, perhaps, towards answering this question. When he first shows up, Kaladin says, "Wit, how are you here?" "I'm not," Wit said, "and neither are you. This is another planet, or it looks like one, and not a pleasant one, mind you, the kind without lights. No stormlight ones, gaseous ones, or even electric ones. Place barely has an atmosphere." Based off of that, first off, I had some of my notes, we just don't have time for it. Fun mentioned there two different types of lights, even electric ones, which is,
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure if that's a like reference to Earth, or if maybe that's, Scadrial. I haven't read the Mistborn ones yet, so I don't know if they have electricity or not. Do they?
No, I don't think so.
Short spoiler. Era 2, yes, they do.
Oh, okay. Anyway, that was a side note. Wit thinks they're on a different planet, which, well, he thinks that they are seeing another planet, but not that they're actually there for real. I think what might be happening here is either this is an image of Ashen, the planet that the humans supposedly came from after destroying it with their surge binding.
Yep.
Or maybe this is a world that has seen the destruction of Odium. Trevor, you mentioned this in the past that I think we've even, did we see in one of our Arcanum Unbounded? Yeah, a world that was after Odium. Basically, if Odium comes in, this is what's left. I wonder if this is a world like that. Yeah, that's as far as I got. I think maybe if Odium is generating this image, this nightmare, maybe he's pulling on the experience that he has, or he's kind of showing him an image of a world he's been to, or what's left of a world that Odium has been to. That was my thoughts.
Yeah. I will say I'm under the assumption that this place does not exist. That it's no specific like location. It's just a dream location. But if we're going to pull on this string a little bit further, my plan B would probably be Braze. That Odium pulled him to Braze, the place where the Voidbringers are banished, or the fused, I should say, are banished after they die, and then they bring back with the Everstorm. That would be my second guess.
Seems logical to me.
All right, anything else for the dog and the dragon?
It's very enjoyable. Very nice chapter.
One thing that I will leave us with is I think it is interesting that Hoid decides to use a story that deliberately Kaladin could not come up with on his own. If you think about dreaming and like how we understand dreams, it is really hard to, well, I'll say it is impossible to come up with a species or animal and name it correctly that you have never experienced before. So when Kaladin wakes up, he will know that it was not just in his head, and he was successful, and he was connected with Hoid. Does that make sense? That Hoid gave him new information, even if it is dogs exist. Like even if it's something as trivial as that, it is still new information to where Kaladin knows that he's not alone, and he has been actually talking to Hoid even when asleep. Now we can talk about 81. Far less monumental chapter, but still worth covering. Eshonai and Venli are back on the Shattered Plains after they have just killed Gavilar with Zeth. And they're questioning themselves as the Alethi show up with, 200,000 people strong at the edge of the Shattered Plains. And they're like, well, why did we have to kill Gavilar? What? We're all going to die anyway. Why did we do this again? What did you guys get from this chapter?
I took away this in combination with, I think, the prologue chapter, the flashback to the prologue night with Venli from the last episode. Eshonai thinks that Eshonai is responsible for the killing of Gavilar.
Yes.
In that previous chapter with Venli, Nail showed up and suggested the whole Zeth kill Gavilar idea. And then Ulam jumps on the train and is like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea for reasons he's not thinking about. But yeah, that's genius. Venli, go do this. Now I'm curious if we're going to get a little bit more of that scene, if it'll continue, and we'll see exactly what did happen. Is Venli more responsible for this than the other characters realize? I'm wondering if that's where it might be headed.
Did Venli come down the stairs and then was like, we need to kill Gavilar? And Eshonai's like, well, yeah, that's what I was about to tell you. We need to kill Gavilar. And then they're both like, how did you know we needed to kill Gavilar? How did you know we needed to kill Gavilar? And then they have a little, yeah, I'd be interested if there was a dialogue there, because you're right. At this point, as far as we know, both Venli and Eshonai think we need to kill Gavilar, and I came up with that.
And at the end of this chapter, Venli is full on like manipulating her people at this point. She has, where at some point she was kind of battling against Ulam and his very manipulative style. Venli's like all in by the end of chapter 81 here.
At the end of the last week's chapter, Ulam says, we need to start a war to scare your people into taking on forms. And so in this chapter, Venli is, we started a war. Actually, she says, Eshonai started a war,
yes,
is what she says. And we need to take these spheres, take these forms of power, and we can save our people, is what she says, tells her friends. Blames it on Eshonai, and then says, take these spheres, we can save our people. Yes.
More and more evidence that Venli was pulling the strings, Venli and or the fuse that she's in contact with, were pulling the strings of the events that we saw back in Words of Radiance, right?
Yep.
End of Words of Radiance. We kind of at the time, at least I did back then, thought a good bit of that was happening by coincidence and or you're kind of more in Eshonai's perspective at that time.
Right.
You're kind of more just discovering things as they're happening. We're realizing now Venli knew a lot. Venli knew quite a bit about what she was doing and was orchestrating things to happen very specifically.
And back in the Way of Kings, Eshonai and Adolin are about to strike some sort of tenuous peace treaty. Yep. And then like that night before there's a meeting, Eshonai goes and takes a storm form. And you're like, oh, they were so close to a peace treaty. But now you're wondering, well, is it coincidence that Eshonai was finally talked into storm form that night? Or, yeah. All right. 82. Knife. Radiant is shouting and screaming at Mraize that you didn't tell me that Kalak was who I was sent to kill, or she assumes that she was sent to kill him. She pretty much was. Mraize says, yep, it's Kalak. Use this dagger that I've hid in the cube. You can open it, turning it clockwise, and go kill or go absorb him into the pommel of the dagger, please. What'd you guys get out of this?
This chapter. So I'm not a whole fan of this. Let's kill our heralds. I think our heralds are cool, or I still wanna know more. I wanna see more their past and learn more about them and everything. And I feel like we're trying to kill them off. It's come up many times throughout our story, and I don't like it. I'm assuming that we're not going to actually kill Clack here. I hope not. That's just me being wishful. I think wishful thinking, because it might happen here. Um, the good sides of this chapter. This was a good chapter. I enjoyed this chapter. That emotional attachment aside, we see. I guess we kind of have one of these knives in hand. This like knife that can absorb a herald into the pommel. And so I'm hoping we learn more about this, more about how this works, and how either it could be undone or how it could be used to our advantage, or some kind of piece coming together with this. Because if this works on heralds, could it also work to like absorb a fused where they like don't come back, right? Like, could this be a tool that we could use in our battle so far?
Yeah.
And stuff. So I'm assuming that more fruit will come from this. And I said in our last episode some things that I feel like we're setting up for later in our story with Shalon. I feel like this knife is could be a big part of that. I feel like this knife may become a bigger piece. We're learning a lot about technology in this book, and I think this could be a very helpful piece of technology, if you will, for our heroes.
Yeah, so Murray's finally reveals his hand, pretty much, in this chapter and says, here's what I sent you here to do, and this is why you should do it. Deliver Kalak to me in this knife. It doesn't kill him. Don't worry about that. Take his place with your Lightweaver abilities. Free Adolin as the High Judge. Convince the Honor Spren to come return to the Windrunners and help us. And you can save millions of lives. Is the hand he plays. And Shalon thinks to herself, man, I wish that didn't make so much sense. Because I'm being manipulated by Marays, I understand that. But it makes a lot of sense. Why would I not take Kalak's place as a Lightweaver and say, yep, Adolin's innocent, you guys should all come back as Windrunners, and let's win the war together. Like, how is that not a good solution here?
In what I feel like is a potentially rare moment for me, I actually feel for Shalon a little bit in this moment. I can relate to this dilemma. Normally, I'm very much in the things are fairly black and white. There's right and there's wrong, and you should always do the right. This scenario, though, has an interesting factor in it, in that we're learning a little bit about Kalak in this chapter, and what is clear is that he's a deserter.
Yep.
Like, in all sense of the word. And he still is. Thousands of years later, from his original desertion, his entire goal, he basically says it, is to get away. He wants to escape. He says to Adolin, buddy, your cause is hopeless. Just jump off the ship while you can. And he even mentions that the whole reason why he's there in Lasting Integrity is to try and find a way off the planet.
Yep.
That's all he cares about. He's just trying to get away. He's just trying to run away. So, kind of with that as context, I kind of maybe see a rationale for someone forcibly making him stay and fix this problem, which is arguably his to begin with. So I don't know. It still feels, I think Shalon or Pattern or somebody says this, that it just feels wrong to be imprisoning a herald like this, and one to be trusting the Ghost Bloods and even doing what they're saying to begin with. But I don't know. At the same time, I kind of see the other side of things of, yeah, this guy is just trying to run. Maybe we should make him stay, and it might help us solve this.
Yeah.
I was not very impressed with Kalak through the interactions we got from him. He seems like pretty textbook definition of a coward.
I didn't actually think. Well, I'm thinking I need to reread because I think you're right. Given the like the evidence we're provided, I don't know why it never like occurred to me that he was a coward.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems pretty right. I feel like I want to honestly reread that and see.
What order of Knights Radiant is associated with Kalak? I was trying to think of this and I couldn't because
he was Truth Watcher, I think.
I want to say Truth Watcher as well.
It is.
I think he was Truth
Okay.
Watcher.
The other one I was trying to think of was Windrunner, but Yezrian is the Windrunners. We know
Yezrian's
that.
Windrunner, Nail
So-
Skybreaker,
Right.
Pawn Stoneward, Shalash Dustbringer.
I think so.
Will Shaper.
He's Will Shaper.
Will Shaper.
Kalak
He's-
is Will Shaper.
Kalak is Venli's Will Shaper Herald.
Okay.
I
don't know. I just feel like I don't understand Will Shapers enough still.
Right. So anyway, tough question for Shalon here. Tough.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to. Like, if I were her, I would probably still just not stab the herald. but but yeah, it is like with that perspective, it's.
And
I see the incentive.
On the other hand, though, I also can't get past the fact that this is a pretty mirror image of something we've seen Moash do,
Right.
which is what he did to Yezrian.
Mraize is the one who's like, yeah, just do it. It'll be fine. And that makes me that I don't trust Mraize at all.
And
right.
If you remember at the end of Oathbringer when Moash does that, all of the heralds felt it, and all of them said he's dead. All of them were like, yeah, we felt that. My dad is dead, is what Shalash says. They killed him.
Yeah.
So for Mraize to say, like, yeah, he's basically a Spren, just put him in the gemstone, he'll be fine. Like, okay, you want to give me some details on the mechanics of that, please?
Yeah.
I do gotta say, I don't think I fully understood. Maybe this came up back when we talked about that event with Yezrian and Moash, and I've just forgotten it, but I don't think I fully appreciated the fact that heralds are Spren. Has this come up before?
I don't know if they are. So they are cognitive shadows, meaning they are sentient investiture that has been separated from their original bodies. Basically, they have died once.
Okay. I remember talking about this now because we talked about it with Nail.
Right. I would not go as far to say they're Spren, which is as far as Mraize is willing to go. I don't know if he says he is a Spren or if he says he's basically a Spren.
I think he says he is a Spren. I think that was the conclusion that they were trying to make.
I'll look it up, but even if he does say that, I am not convinced that the heralds are one-on-one equivalent to a Spren.
Yeah, that confused me too. I was like, well, I thought I understood Spren, So then could he be whatever I imagine him to be, that classic?
Yes, exactly. He's 4 inches tall.
Uh-huh.
I'm recalling now our discussion about the cognitive shadows that it was like Vasher Zyle actually that kind of broke
Mhm.
some of that information to us, and we talked about it then.
Yep.
And we
Yeah,
had
I
to
think
we had to
so.
add some new categories to our understanding there. Okay, now it's coming back to me.
Did he refer to like an additional life? Vasher, I could be wrong.
Basically,
He was like, well, maybe in the, you have to know death or something like that.
Can I read the conversation here between Mraize and Shallan?
yeah.
Yes.
Vale felt it click as she touched it. She suspected Mraize had done something to unlock the device from wherever he was. When she twisted that plane of the cube, it turned easily and came off, revealing a small compartment that contained an intricate metal dagger with a gemstone at the end of the grip. So do you want me to kill him? She said. You cannot kill a herald, Mraize said. They are immortal. Do not think of Kalek as a person. He is an ageless, eternal spren formed of honor, substance, and will. He is as gravity or light. Force, not man.
Is that true?
I don't think it is. We've never been confirmed this and properly shirted today. Brandon Sanderson has Rafoed any specifics on how the Oath Pact was created and like the specific mechanics of it. But I'm under the impression, I've always been under the assumption that the heralds were normal people who created the Oath Pact and then became cognitive shadows at that point. Like they were invested enough, gave up their original
Yeah.
bodies. They were normal people like, Kaladin, for example.
Mhm.
Like super invested normal person gives up their body, goes to damnation, seals away. The Voidbringers comes back onto Roshar, and at that point you're a cognitive shadow. So immortal, yes. Spren like, sure, but I would argue that he was likely originally a person.
This is potentially shedding some light on my final question for this chapter, which is Thydakar.
Yes.
There's a mention, Mraize drops it in this chapter. He says, our master Thydakar has an affliction similar to that of the heralds. He needs access to a herald to learn more about his state so he might save himself from the worst of its effects. I was scratching my head about what that might be until you just shared that conversation there of if the heralds are cognitive shadows, meaning that they've died, but their soul is attached to investiture, however that works. Maybe Thydakar is a cognitive shadow, and maybe he recently has become one and wants a herald to come explain to him how it works or something like that, or to study or to experiment on or whatever.
How
they
do I
want to
reattach myself to my body,
do.
please?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, okay. I'd buy that. Interesting. Yes, back to Kalak. He did not impress me either. He is certainly a deserter. And he tells Adolin, you set yourself up for failure, dude. I'll be the judge if they want me to be the judge, but this whole thing is going to be a sham. They will define honor. They'll bring in like the dead eyes from outside and say, look what your ancestors did. They killed Spren, and that'll be it. Like the end.
Shallan is also a fantastic example against Adolin if we want to harken back to our recent discussion about her. If Shallan has previously killed a Spren, and that Spren is there in the room, there's two pieces of evidence that could go not well for Adolin.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like, look what you've done. Literally you. Like,
yep. Because Adolin's going to try and get up there and argue this doesn't happen anymore. That
yeah, you're right.
See all these dead eyes? That was ages ago. Something happened. They made a mistake. They killed all these dead eyes. We today, the new Order of Knights Radiant, are not doing that. If our recent theories are true, there is a Radiant standing right next to him who has done exactly that. For not any sort of defendable, honorable reason.
Right. I mean, she was 7 and traumatized. I guess is the only defense there.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated situation. Yes. But
All right. Look, let's not take Shalon as an example here. This is just
Right.
inconvenient. My
also
wife,
think
I
it's-
love you, dear. Please don't come to the trial tomorrow.
I also think it's kind of funny that Adolin is giving this is going to be giving this case for all the Knights Radiant, and he's our one character that we're following that is not
Is not a
bonded to
Knights
Spren.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes me think maybe he has a really good perspective on it. I'm hoping so.
I think that works in his favor, right? I don't know that they'd listen to a Radiant.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't think
that's
they would
true.
have let, Dalinar if he came it.
Right.
They wouldn't let him in to begin with, so.
So I think he's
But-
got
Aren't they
You know-
reverent to the
The
bondsmiths?
Stormfather. They used to
Kind
be.
of, yeah.
They just
Okay.
assume everybody's crazy for bonding people these days and just shun them.
Okay.
I mean, if we're trying to look on the bright side for Adolin here, he's got a few things in his favor. He's got a good track record of his own honor, I suppose. He's not a Radiant, so he can kind of speak outside of it. He's got Maya, right? That's his kind of what I think might be his ace up his sleeve is the connection he's able, little C connection, or maybe big C connection, that he's been able to build with Maya. I stumble a little bit, though, in that I'm trying to kind of stack up, okay, what's in favor of Aelin, what's against. All of that may be completely irrelevant if, one, Kalak tells us that this whole thing is going to be a sham, and or if Shalon takes him out and she stands in as Restaris, as the high judge of this, the whole thing is going to be just kind of a for show anyway. Maybe me trying to figure out whether Adolin has a case or not is going to be completely irrelevant.
And then they find out that it's Shalon manipulating them. Oh, man.
Oh, dear.
Especially Honor Spren finding a cryptic. We know there's no love lost there. There could... Literally anything could happen with this. So... We can keep reading and find out, unless you guys have anything else to discuss.
I think we should do that.
Alrighty. Sounds good. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot. We will reconvene next week.
Farewell.
Hasta luego.